Thank you. Right. A scientific approach to storytelling, and I will tell you why I have named it scientific approach. So what is there that I'm going to speak about? I'm going to speak about stories and hormones. That's biology for you. I'm going to talk about shapes of stories. That's physics and maths for you, because that's what we studied in physics and maths. And the key element to enhance storytelling, that's chemistry for you, elements, right? In our class 2, if we are saying that studying science, I think it's always physics, chemistry, maths, and biology. So I have tried to put all 4 together and experiment with storytelling. Let's see how it goes. Right. First, we'll look into stories and hormones. Right. In the year 2009, there's a journalist, his name Rob Walker. He was very intrigued by storytelling and he wanted to find out what is their power. So what he did was he bought up things from eBay. Just randomly he brought up things. For example, this horse head that is shown over here is one of the things, and the cost of this, each of these items was around $1. He made a very conscious call not to exceed $1.5 or and yeah, this cost of all of them should be around $1. Then what he did was he invited all his friends he knew and asked all of this. There's a professional writers and asked all of them to write a story against each of these items. And guess what? He found 200 different writers to write 200 different stories for each of these objects. He called the study significant object study. Now he had 200 objects. He had 200 different stories. And with great anticipation, he again put every of these items in eBay for sale. Guess what happened? These items, which were bought for around approximately $1, for example, this horse was sold for $62.95. So this horse head was sold for $62.95. Now that's a profit of 6,300 percentage. Now you can imagine the amount of percentage that profit he made by just adding stories to it. So overall, the 200 items, it costed around $129 for him to purchase. But when he sold them with the stories, he made an amount of $8,000. That's a rough amount. This story is found in New York Times. Is there on the papers. Is there in the New York Times, and it's been a wonderful study ever since. In fact, PQ Media, who studies on the revenues and the sales, they say around 10.5 billions is the turnover in product placement revenue yearly. Now, if you don't understand this business jargons, it's very simple that when people place a product on the market, how much is the turnover they face? That is the amount. So $10.5 billion. Now, before I go into, let's say you watch the James Bond movie. What do you feel? Oh, I want to be the James Bond. And what do? You go out and voila, you see a watch shop over there, right? You walk straight into the watch shop. And what happens? Oh, you see that Omega watch. James Bond has won that Omega watch. So you want that Omega watch. You want to be like James Bond, although you know sometimes behind your mind you can never be James Bond. James Bond is not a reality, it's just a fictional character, but you buy that Omega watch, say for $10,000, and you sell a fortune to get that watch. In fact, a very interesting thing happened. You remember the Hutch ad, the Hutch advertisement when we from Vodafone, before Vodafone there was Hutch, and we had this thing 1, 2, 3, and then Hutch dog was there. So that was a pub. The breed of pub dog that actually value market value increases many a fold time once the Hutch advertisement took into place, and pub dogs have been very much in demand. So this is the effect the story can put into the market price. All right. So this is something we call emotional investment, that when we are actually buying a thing, and if our emotion is into it, our brains are hijacked. we cannot think objectively. We just invest into it because it has some emotional value. Remember, just if you don't believe me, just go into some auction houses. This pen has been used by so and so so many years ago. I mean, it's just a pen, it doesn't matter, but it's sold for such a high value. People spend a lot of money on emotions. That's the power of a story, right? So if you look at the emotional investment graph, you see when people feel elated, when people feel happy, when they are in an euphoric state, when they feel blissful about a product, through the story that is attached to the product, they would pay anything for that. Remember the times when you went to a particular place, and if you see this thing having a theme based, for example, Harry Potter fans, the moment you see a Harry Potter themed restaurant, a Harry Potter themed bookshop, you go there. It's nothing, it's just a bookshop. You sit on the chair which has Gryffindor written on it. You pull up that plastic sword, it's written Gryffindor sword, and you buy it with a high price. That's called emotional investment. And the greatest emotion, in my words, is love. So what happens when you fall in love? Anyone? I want to hear from someone. What happens when you fall in love? Tell me. Someone can unmute and tell me what happens when you fall in love.
You feel like going back to your teens.
Okay, fantastic. Anyone else? What happens when you fall in love? Okay.
You grow emotionally strong, especially if you've fallen in love with yourself.
Correct. So what happens actually when you fall in love is everything around us is so beautiful. We hear the music beautiful, the same song is so beautiful, because at that time, studies has made it that our brains are actually filled with some hormones like oxytocin, hormones like serotonin, dopamine, endorphins, all everything. The same cup of tea, the same cup that you had every day is now much more beautiful when you are having it around with your loved ones. Everything looks beautiful, and your logical and your emotional and objective thinking, it just goes out of the window. That was love. That is what love is. Now, the funny thing about storytelling is storytelling can give you the same effect as love does. It can hijack your brain. It can actually make you logical out of the window. We'll see how it does. So I will introduce 3 hormones to you, and I call them the angel's cocktail. Now, these 3 hormones are dopamine, oxytocin, and endorphin. Right. What this hormones does, we will look into it, but this hormones actually can hijack your brain and make you feel blissful, right? The same thing we are going to achieve through story. We'll see one at a time. Dopamine. So this is the chemical structure of dopamine, and what it does when you are filled with dopamine, you feel focused, you feel motivated, you have great memories, you form great memories. So all those memory enhancers that you get in the market are filled with dopamine because it gives you better memory. Right. If you induce oxytocin, you feel generosity, you feel trust, you feel beauty. That's why oxytocin is also known as the love hormone. Right. Same thing, and we will go into the storytelling part of it. And the third and the most important is endorphin. Endorphin gives you laughter, endorphin gives you creativity, it makes you relaxed. So, right. So before I go into the storytelling of this entire thing, right, if all of you can, please put on your videos because it's very important. I see your faces. I'll tell you now, I want all of you to listen very carefully. It was around 2 o'clock in the night. Messi had the ball. Messi went past 1. Messi went past 2. He dribbles. Oh my God, what a wonderful rush. And Messi runs across the defensive pass, goes past every defender, and he shoots. And the ball ends up in the net. Goal! I shouted, euphoric. I froze. I looked around. I looked outside. I looked at my neighbors. The lights went on. For some time they stayed on. All of the lights went dark. I knew what it meant. The next day, all my neighbors ganged up and came to my place. Now my father, who himself is a great football fan, started explaining to them. See, this is the World Cup. This comes once in a year. Messi was creating magic. How can someone hold back? There is absolutely no logic. But whatever my father said, it didn't actually work for those neighbors. They surpassed every defense that my father put up, and then they scored their goals. What I did absolutely made no sense. It made no logic. Ladies and gentlemen, recall that moment in your life when your brain has been hijacked and you did things that absolutely made logic to yourselves, that absolutely made no logic to anyone else, but you were still euphoric. I remember when I was growing up in the early 80s, yeah, I'm an old man. It was a time of the Doordarshans, the Ramayanas, the Mahabharatas, the Alif Lailas. You see, all those ghosts would come. I want to gobble you. But you know, I was not afraid at all. You know why? Because Lord Ram was there. He would pick up his bow and he would shoot the arrows and kill all the demons. And I felt so happy and so comfortable because Lord Ram was there to protect me. But then it was in the night that I felt afraid and scared. What if those ghosts, they come? What if they put their long stretched hands and grab me outside the window to take me away from my parents? And I would cry and say, oh, Mommy, Mommy. And my mother always knew, as if by some magic. She just knew it. Close your eyes and pray to Lord Ram. And I have prayed ever since. I have prayed that I pass my exams. I have prayed that Sachin scores a century. I have prayed that Messi scores the winner. And I have prayed that my wife forgets. Ladies and gentlemen, have you ever prayed? Have your prayers been answered? There's some things that logic cannot explain. Now, as a child, I was very difficult to manage because unlike most of you, I was not interested in the books. All I wanted was to play, 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 and do anything else but study. But there was my mom to keep me in check. Okay, you are not listening to me. Let your dad come. I will tell him everything. I would freeze at that. My little brain tried to logically analyze what is it that my mom can tell my dad? What is the secret she is hiding about me? So years later, today I am married and I still don't know what is it that remains hidden between a husband and his wife. But it worked then. And I actually started the books and I started studying. And what happens when you start studying? Your emotions go out, your logic starts coming in. And the same thing happened with me. I started studying the physics, the chemistry, the biology. But then no one could explain me why the molecules bind and the heart breaks. No thesis could make me understand why is it that science can teach you everything out of there, can actually induce things in your brain, but cannot teach you much about your heart. I was really surprised. Then I grew up, and what happens when you study so much? You grow up to become a teacher, and I started teaching. I started teaching the same physics, chemistry, biology that I have learned as a child. And one day, while I was teaching, I said, "Hey, look at the white color. You know what? It's the most wonderful color that you ever get." And my students asked, "Why, sir? Tell us, tell us." And I said, "Because white color is made up of all colors." Is it? I heard a voice behind me. I looked back, and behind me was standing my mom in a white sari. She has recently been a widow. In a white sari, it looked like she has lost all the colors of her life. What logic could actually explain that? No physics, no chemistry, no science could explain that. And I grew up and I fell in love. I fell in love with the most wonderful lady. And then everything looked so colorful. And then one day she came to me. She came very close to me. She planted sticks and told me, "Darling, it's over." My heart was broken. No biology could explain that phenomenon. And it took me time to understand the logic that a broken heart has 1,000 pieces to love. So I fell in love all over again. I fell in love with all the people around, and I fell in love with myself. And I found a job for myself. Today, I'm a software engineer. I delve in logic, ifs and else, the binaries, the ones and the zeros. It's telling me absolutely yes or no. But then there are things that logic cannot explain. There are things that goes beyond logic. So, ladies and gentlemen, today I ask you to look at things not from a logical framework, but from a thing that logic cannot explain. Because it's high time that we change the canvas that we are looking into. We put on those lenses where binaries dissolve and colors evolve. Thank you. I want all of you to unmute and tell me how you felt through those stories. You can all unmute. Anyone can speak up who has not spoken.
It was a wonderful curve of emotions.
Okay. So what I wanted to say is that did you feel focused? Did you feel motivated?
Yeah.
Did you feel generosity? Did you feel a bond between me, my mother, and and my little self? Did you look at the creativity that was created? The creativity of did you laugh? Were you relaxed when you listen to the stories? Because in this entire story of 5 or 6 minutes, your brain was hijacked by all these hormones. Well, what if we can take this power and use it in our business and day-to-day life? But before we go into that, there is something I want to induce to you, is the devil's cocktail. So the devil's cocktail has only 2 hormones, and these are adrenaline and cortisol. So what this hormones does, they bring in intolerance, irritation, bad decisions, impaired memory, uncreative. So all the negative things that happens to you is because of this hormones, when your brain is filled with these hormones. And I'll tell you how an angry story or a bad story looks like. Okay, fine. 1, 2, 3. Listen very carefully, all of you. How a bad story looks like. Ah! Did you feel irritated? Now, here's the thing. You are all filled with the devil's cocktail most of the times in your life. In your business scenarios, in your day-to-day life, you know that what people are You go into a meeting, you know there's an escalation, people are angry about it, people are not happy with the work, client is demanding, you are delayed for the all these things are there. Mostly people around us are filled with this two hormones, the devil's cocktail. So what is the story you want to tell to them? Do you want to tell to them a happy story, or do you want to tell to them a sad story? Now here's the thing. Most people think that to be a great storyteller, you have to be that grand old or a grand old bearded person with a very dark voice. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. No, you need not have that voice. You need not be a grand person. All of you have stories. Every damn person is a storyteller. Every damn person has so many things from their life to look into and tell stories. So if you want to tell the story, what is it that you need to do? Write down your stories, probably in a notepad if you want a notebook. If not, if you hate to write down, someone like me who is a lazy person, make a mental note. And these days we are in the world of hashtagging. So hashtag them. Hashtag, this is my story for the happy emotion. Hashtag, this is my story for the sad one. Hashtag, this is my story that creates laughter. Hashtag, this is my story that creates generosity. I will tell you, recently I faced an office escalation because my team didn't perform well, and we had to go ahead and explain them. And they basically, what the client wanted to know how this thing went ahead. And I just told them, you know what, this has nothing to do with the business, but I'm going to tell you, give me a couple of minutes. I'm just going to tell you what I'm going through. I just lost a very dear cousin of mine to COVID, and I was in an emotional breakdown. Things actually didn't fall in place. And I know that personal and professional life has to be separated, but somewhere down the line, I am a human and I'm sorry that this happened. I'll do my best that it never happens in the future. The lessons have been learned. The moment I told them my story, they felt generous. They said, it's okay, we never know what things go on the other side. So you have actually admitted, and it's a very tough situation, we understand, and things went in a much smoother way. We didn't have to pay a penalty, so nothing serious happened that was anticipated. Just a 2-minute story had the effect of saving thousands of dollars, right? So storytelling is not today's art. Before I close this part of the session, where hormones and storytelling, the biology of it, know the storytelling is an ancient art. Thousands of years ago, when people started communicating, they would gather around a fireplace and would tell stories. Storytelling was the ancient art of transferring knowledge. We do transfer knowledge transfer, KTs, everything, these terms. 10,000s of years ago, people would tell stories to transfer knowledge. That's how this great stories of Ramayanas and Mahabharatas and every Odysseys that you look in the world has evolved through oral. Some 5,000 years ago, people started storytelling through cave painting, drawing on the wall. Then came the books, and people started writing them, the text, the Vedas, and everything. PowerPoint came only 30 years ago. So what do you think? Where is our brain oriented to? Just think.
Storytelling.
Right. So I'll go to my next section, which is the shapes of stories. We have covered the biology. That was the physics and the maths. Every story, I think when I asked you, how did you feel? They said that it went through the curve of happiness and darkness, and you feel the emotions. Now, Kurt Vonnegut, in his master thesis in anthropology in the University of Chicago, said that all stories can be, that time they never had this computers and they never had this artificial intelligence, and computers was just coming to the market. So he gave his thesis wherein he said that all stories can actually be plotted against a graph. And this graph looked like GI graph, but XY graph, the very same X and Y we used in mathematics, but he called the graph as GI graph and BE graph. So GI is actually the Y-axis, where G stands for greatness, the great situation that you are in, the rich, the prosperous. and I for the negative part of it, and B is the beginning, and E he called the electricity, because at the end they would get electrocuted. So E is the end. So this is the GI graph we are looking at. So look at the various shapes that the stories can actually present to us. Right. Okay, fine. The first graph that we are going to look at, the first shape is called the man in the hole. Now, this is a very common thing that happens in our day-to-day life. The main character is at a good position. The main character is at a in the y-axis or the g-axis is in a good state, and then the main character somewhere gets into trouble, and he actually falls into some darknesses, and then by some brilliant idea or by some fortune or whatever it may be, he finally ends up having a better experience of life, and he actually goes on to a higher level from where he started. Some examples are Harold and Kumar go to White Castle, Alice in Wonderland. Now, what can you tell me? So, because I need this to be interactive, so can you give me an example wherein you feel that people might actually experience this GI graph?
One recent example is Tufan movie.
Okay, Tufan movie. Now, the reason why I've given is Western movies, because a few days ago I was presenting it to a Western Toastmasters, and I was lazy not to change it to Indian name. Someone, come on, please come up with some names where you feel that main character started, fell in trouble, and then get off. Any movie, any book, anywhere, someone. Guys, come on. Okay. Anyone?
Jungle maybe.
Okay, now you are coming. Now you are coming up with the names. Okay, right. So please keep thinking. This is how the graph looks like, the GI graph. So good fortune, and I is ill fortune. Okay, so you start off with good fortune. You start off at the beginning, then you run in a bit of trouble, and yeah, something happens, and you finally end up in a prosperous situation. This is how the GI graph looks like, right? So it's called the man in the hole thing. Now the next and the most famous of all is the boy meets girl. People have actually given it various names, but main character is in a not so good position, somewhere in the GI graph, maybe a bit on the I side, ill fortune side, maybe a bit on the G side, but it's not in a very good position, and then comes across something wonderful. Basically, people say is boy meets girl, and then that wonderful blessing goes away from that. The boy falls into darkness. The main character is actually filled with depression and everything negative. But for some reason, main character recovers whatever he or she has lost, and then again goes into enormous prosperity. Jab We Met, Slumdog Millionaire, yeah, there's some stories. There's actually a movie by the name Boy Meets Girl. So yeah. So again, I want you to give a couple of examples fast, guys. Someone, anyone, just one example, shout out. Anyone, unmute and shout out. Come on. Every romantic story is like this. Almost every Bollywood movie that we see is boy meets girl. One movie. Sorry? Ha, okay, fine. Yeah, I got it. DDLG. Yeah. So anything you will see, you will find. So what I want you is to analyze the stories and look at from a standard that what is the graph that they are following. DDLG. Okay, fine, fantastic. DDLG will do for the sake of time, right? So here's the graph. We start off in somewhere in between good fortune and ill fortune, because that does not matter where we start off. It shows, I mean, this graph actually shows meets girl, but it can be anything. It need not be a romantic story. It can be you get a lot of money, you lose the money, then you get back the money once again, you get back more money. It can be anything. It can be any damn story. Maybe you were not good in studies, then you got a good tutor, you went there, your tutor died, your results depressed, then you found your friends who lifted you up and you got admitted to IIT. Boy meets girl story, right? You follow this graph. And the next is from bad to worse, and this is like nothing good happens. You start off at a poor situation and things get continuously worse. There's no hope for improvement. It's like you go from bad to worse. It's basically the story of druggist, wherein poor boy got into drugs, got into mafia, and then his life was in the ruins, spent the rest of his life in jail, become a terrorist, got shot, dead. So there is nothing much positive in the stories, but it's a form of stories. And we do have Metamorphosis and the Twilight Zone. If you can come up with an example, you're always free to ping in the chat. I will accelerate for the sake of time. So yeah, basically, so nothing much happens in the life, and then yeah, they just go on. Probably if you are not getting a story, I would always ask you to look into Mahabharata, because it is that story which has every form of stories. But any thing out of it it just goes bad. It just goes from bad to worse. You pick up a story and you can plot it against the graph, right? Okay, which way is up? Now, in this type of stories, you don't know whether good is happening or whether bad is happening, right? For example, in Hamlet, the Hamlet meets his father's ghost. You don't know whether the first time he goes to meet his father's ghost, you don't know whether that ghost is for real, that ghost has come to kill him. Okay, right. Okay, fine. I'll give you one good example of this story. Macbeth. Now, Macbeth started off as a king and he met those three witches, and then things started getting ruined till the time he died. Okay, which way is off? You don't know what happened, whether this is good, whether this is bad. So it's just a plain straight line. Examples: Hamlet, Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. And I'll tell you why Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, when people have asked me, why do you think this is a ambiguity, this is which way up story? The reason is very simple. In Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, till we read the seventh part, we don't know whether Snape turning into a different form, whether Dumbledore dying is good or bad, whether living Harry Potter in that situation, finding that this Horcrux is gone forever and Voldemort will not find it again, good or bad, we don't know till the seventh part comes up. So there lies the ambiguity. You just don't know, but you still go ahead and enjoy the story. And this is one of the most difficult forms of stories. It confuses the reader, but then again, they are hooked for it, right? The creation story. The creation stories is it's a wonderful fantasy stories. These are mostly our culture stories, wherein people receive gifts and then small portions, and then they go up. So, for example, Aladdin, he received this wonderful lamp and he got the genie, and then things started happening. He received some riches, then he received some house, some prosperity, and finally he has to marry the princess. Prince Arjun, for example, if you look at the story of Arjuna, son of God, blessed son of God, received some training from the best teacher, Dronacharya, and then he becomes a legend probably by the end of the war. So while during the end, before the war, he receives Lord Shiva's blessing, the Pashupat, everything. So this is always in an incremental position, right? So these are mostly, you won't find many examples in the Eastern stories, and people love these stories. If you want to fantasize, if you want to put people into fantasy, these are the types of stories, right? And finally, the Old Testament. The Old Testament is just creative story wherein there is a dark side. It's like the Midas, right? The Midas touch. You get everything, and then all of a sudden, by some curse, you lose it. The story of Moses, right? He had all the blessings, but he could not go to the promised land. So you receive that gift, and things happen for you, and then all of a sudden, one day, you just lose everything, never to come back out of it. Why I gave these two, creation story and Old Testament story, because if you put them together, you get the Cinderella type story. Now, Kurt Vonnegut named it Cinderella, so I am going to use the same name, Cinderella, and it's actually the combination of these two, creation story and the Old Testament story. And I'm sure you have heard this type of story. Now, here the main character starts off from a little bit on the ill fortune, a lonely girl, not having much, mother day, stepmother torturing her. Then all of a sudden, fairy godmother comes her, gives her the gifts, gives her all the things. She goes to the party, meets the princess, dances with the prince. clock strikes 12, and then he comes back into darkness. Does she come back into the same level of darkness? That's debatable. Maybe she's a bit elated because she has met the prince. Maybe those happy memories actually work for her. And then the prince hunts for the girl. She finds the shoe fits in, and then she becomes a queen once again to reserve enormous prosperity, right? So this type of story is the Cinderella type story. We start off with the ill fortune, and slowly and slowly we get up, wherein we go to the good fortune side. You are on an all-time high, and then all of a sudden things went bad, and then you struggle, you remain at the same level unless something happens and you just go up to the level wherein you actually become great, right? Okay. And so if we take all of them together, this is what the graph looks like. Now you might be asking, why did I give you this lecture? Why is it that I am telling you this story about shapes and how the stories looks like? Because essentially all of us in Toastmasters especially, we write stories and we want to tell the stories, and from a contest point of thing, we want to win it. It comes to self-service. We do it because we want to win it. We want to be the best in what we want. So whenever you write your stories, next time, these two things should come into. See which are the hormones that would get induced by your stories, and what is the shape your stories following. Because many a time I have mentored people who have actually mixed and matched shapes. They have given this ambiguity type of stories, and I say, please avoid this type of stories, because although they are a good read, from the contest point of view, people would actually not know what to do. The judges are confused. Because on the judges chair, I'll tell you sometimes that there are people who sit for whom I really don't have much respect, and they think that they can do a lot of justice, but then they are judgmental. And so what is the story type? Draw a graph against your story. See which is the graph you are following. Is this graph the graph that you want your story to go against? You need not write the entire story, just write your points and see where is it that they feel elated. Is there a deep? Is your story taking the swing, emotional swing? If the swing is there, is the emotional swing too high or too low for people to actually adjust? Because in a space of 7 minutes, if you make them swing too high or too low, probably things will not work out. Which brings me to the third part of my lecture, is the key element, the chemistry of it, to enhance storytelling. Before I go, once again, I would ask you, what do you think? Any guesses can enhance the storytelling, can make your storytelling really wonderful? Anyone? What do you think can make your storytelling really wonderful? Anyone?
Humor.
Humor, okay.
Elements with which the audience can relate.
Okay, and what is that element? One element I want to know.
Any anecdote?
Anecdotes. Huh.
Okay, anecdotes. No, anecdotes are short stories. Anecdotes are short stories. Stories within a story. When I told this entire story, I was telling my childhood story. I was telling this story. So anecdotes are short. Sorry?
Emotions.
Emotions. Okay.
You are on mute.
I'm sorry. Yeah, please continue. One more answer. Go ahead. One more answer. I need one more answer. Anything. What is one element you feel like? Am I audible? Hello?
Happy ending.
Happy ending. Okay, fine. We'll look at it. I think. Okay. Okay, fine. It's a dialogue. Dialogues are the key element to enhance storytelling. Because if I tell you a story in a passive voice, for example, the same story, if I tell you, and then my mother told that she would tell everything to my father, and I was like, Mom, I was like, how do you think my mom is going to tell that to father? I don't know. If the dialogue never happened, would it have the same impact? Tell me, yes, no, what do you think? Guys, you can be on unmute. I don't mind. It's just that as long as I don't get background noises. So it's a bit interactive. If the dialogue did not come in.
First person is always
Yeah,
Yes.
first person, you need to have dialogues because dialogues make that impact. So I'll give you that 3 very essential tips how to write dialogue like a pro. And yeah, this is just, yeah, for example, this is just for the fun part of it. But once again, okay. So theory, what is a dialogue? It's a conversation between characters when uh, people are talking with each other. That's it. Nothing much. Don't complicate too much. And I always love to kiss. Don't get me wrong. Keep it simple and straight. Nothing much. So dialogue is the conversation between characters, right? Now, what happens when you give dialogues in your story? It makes the story enriched. There is color into the story. There is beauty in the story. It makes exciting, and it helps the story to move forward. You can make it move fast forward, you can slow down, you can make it sound exciting, you can make them sound sad. So this is the dialogue, and if properly used, it's one of the most powerful technique. And then there is a one more element into dialogues in our Toastmasters forum of story writing, is that when you introduce dialogue in the contest, you can show your vocal variety. For example, you can tell, "Mummy, please, mummy." "Oh, you are not listening to me. I will tell everything to your dad." You get the difference, right? So dialogues can make it sound wonderful, right? So what goes into effective dialogue writing? Is the first skill is social skills. They say that I mean, if you ask people around, they say, what is it? How is it that you can? They say, be social. You need to get mixed up with friends. You need to make conversations. You go ahead, solve conflicts, be pleasant and polite. You do dialogue things. That is there. Everyone says that, but that is exactly the skills we are not going to look into. In fact, these are the skills I tell, these are the anti-social skills, right? So the first skill that I'm going to look into is eavesdropping. Not a very good practice, but if you want to write dialogues, get used to it. For example, just listen to people. God has given you 2 years to listen to. Start listening to people, right? And what happens when you start listening to people? You register things in your head. For example, I remember in the beginning of my career, I was in Chennai and people around me were talking in Tamil and everything was going on in Tamil, and I was struggling. The reason is they were talking about things, something which was not registering in my head. The moment I was transferred to Kolkata, I started prospering because they were speaking in my native language. Even if it's not related to my project, you know what? I heard someone say that thing. That is the solution which they implemented in that project. Why don't we do it in that project? Those are the things that came into the picture. The same thing with story writing. You hear 2 persons talking in a bus, not that you interfere, but if you need not be a proactive listener, you need not be a no spoker, but you can always be a listener and keep your ears active for good dialogues. And this dialogues, actually good dialogues, happen in our day-to-day life. 2 people, maybe 2 totally uneducated people, the best of dialogues that come from them. So please listen out for dialogue, and it makes your character authentic. I'll give you a demo. First person say, "I did not." Second person says, "I saw you." Now, who are these 2 persons? Now you need to start pretending. These 2 dialogues, the first person, maybe the kid is saying, 2 kids are fighting in the class. And then the first kid says, "You started the fighting." And the second kid, "No, I did not." Second kid, "I saw you." Maybe it's the husband and wife fighting. "You were having an affair with her. I saw you." "I did not." Something like that. Maybe someone is eating a cake in the kitchen. What I did for most of my life, eating good things out of the kitchen, and my mom scolding me. And "Did you eat the cake?" "I did not." "I saw you." So you see, the moment you start pretending these people, things started working out. As teacher and a student, we were cheating in the exam. "No, ma'am, certainly I did not." "Don't fool me. I saw you." You see, the voice annotations, everything comes into picture. The moment you start pretending, and this is your second skill, eavesdrop and then start pretending of putting in this dialogues. And it's okay if you don't get it in the first time, right? So some other things you need to do to start pretending is get into their shoes. What are they like? Where are they from? What do they do? What is their ethnicity? What is that age group? For example, the way a very old man would say, I did not, is very different from the way a 25-year-old young man would say. So it's very, again, the same 25-year-old young man from Jorhat would speak the way I saw you is very much different from someone who is sitting in Texas who would say, I saw you. So get into their shoes, start pretending that you are these people and have these conversations in your mind, continuously have these conversations, and the best of dialogues, I promise you, will come out of you, right? And muttering to yourself, this is a bad habit, which I have, and I had faced many a flank, but then the best element of storytelling is you fill the characters. If you don't fill the characters, you don't know how to say the story. If you don't know how to say the story, you will sound natural, you will sound superficial. I'll tell you what happened. Before I end this, I'll tell you actually what happened in my entire thing. Okay, fine. So anyways, to summarize, eavesdropping, pretending to the character, and muttering to yourself. And remember that if delivered effectively, dialogue can actually take your stories to another scale.